Okay, first on the agenda today is Senate File 856. Is Representative Norris? There he is. Representative Norris, since you are not a member of the committee, I will bring Senate File 856 before the committee. Please proceed to introduce things, and I will then move your DE once you have a chance to talk about it.
Great. Thank you, Chair Nash, and members of the committee. It's good to be with you once again. Fraud in any form remains unacceptable, and I remain committed to taking appropriate action to address it here in Minnesota. An independent Office of the Inspector General is one tool we can use to both prevent and investigate fraud. And it's why I've been working now for about a year and a half to create such an office. This is a bipartisan effort that requires diligence and intentionality. I've made it clear that I'm not interested in rushing legislation through simply because of the politics of the moment. What I am interested in is crafting an office that will deliver the results Minnesotans expect from day one. The author's amendment I'm bringing forward today is a step in that direction. I want to say up front, I believe there are still critical concerns that need to be resolved with this bill's language before it is ready to be passed by the Minnesota House. I do not see the bill, even after today's author's amendment, as a finished product. However, the author's amendment does represent an important step in the right direction and demonstrates the commitment of my colleagues and me to continue working in good faith with members of both parties to get to a solution we can all support. The author's amendment I'm bringing forward today does several things. First, it addresses the unconstitutional appointment process language in the bill that passed the Senate and brings the appointment process in line with constitutional requirements. Second, it adds to the powers and duties of the OIG to allow it to prevent fraud from occurring in the first place, rather than just investigate it after the fact. Specifically, it allows the OIG to, 1, establish standards and best practices concerning the operation, investigations, and fraud prevention processes across the entire state enterprise, along with reviewing performance against these standards. 2, facilitate information sharing between departments and agencies to avoid multiple state agencies being defrauded by the same suspect. And 3, evaluate the performance of agency inspectors general and recommend improvements as needed, and report on these findings to the legislature. And third, the bill also, the author's amendment also adopts several other relatively minor or non-controversial language changes that have come about as we've taken a closer look at the version that passed the Senate. I am committed to continuing to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, including Representative Anderson, as this bill progresses through the future committee stops to resolve the remaining sticking points required for it to pass the House and deliver on our shared goal of fighting fraud in Minnesota. Thank you, Chair Nash.
Thank you, Representative Norris. I'll remind you that not only is it bipartisan, and we don't always recognize the other body as being, valuable, but we should recognize that this is both bicameral and bipartisan as well. So the chair will move your DE6 for you to come before the committee. You've described it. Questions? I believe, Representative Joy, you had told me that you have a question to the author's amendment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You might want to turn your mic on.
It's on.
Okay.
Hopefully. Maybe they disconnected it, though.
Representative Joy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this forward. This is, we've kind of played tennis back and forth on this, getting this moving. And some of the questions I have, and I'm glad we're going to continue working on it. Usually we've heard many times in this committee, if the bill's not ready for prime time, we don't move it. But this is an important piece of legislation. Keep moving. So one of the things I have is in sections 9.1 to 9.23, when you read about the Department of Human Services has primary responsibility to investigate fraud in the Medicaid program, but the Inspector General has authority to conduct independent investigation. And then we drop down to 9.24. It says alert an agency issues to seek court order to freeze funds. If the department or agency does not have primary investigation authority under subdivision 2, the Inspector General shall investigate. I think that needs some clarification, because it kind of seems like to me that we could end up in fraud situations there, but then we're going to well, who is a department over here has primary and down here it says if they don't have primary, to freeze the funds. And my concern is we're gonna continue funding fraud and they can't freeze funds, and then it's just gonna get into another piece of legislation we have back at the table to clarify to the agency, like we have in many bills, who has the right authority. So that's one area I have some concern on, Representative Norris. If we could work on that or get some legislation move along, I'd be happy to work with that too. But that's my concern in the bill, so I appreciate it.
Representative Norris.
Yeah. Chair Nash and Representative Joy, you raise a good point, and it's one that we as the authors of the bill have spent a lot of time debating and trying to work through with nonpartisan staff. One of the challenges that we have is that there are federal rules that require agencies that are administering Medicaid dollars to be the primary investigators of fraud within programs administered by those agencies. And so what we're trying to do is still adhere to those federal rules, but make sure that those investigations occur in the first place and occur to the standards that we expect. And so what we're trying to do with the language is walk that fine line. I appreciate the feedback, and we can continue to take a hard look at that and make sure we've got the language tightened up as appropriately as possible. But that's a little bit of the background on why that language is the way that it is.
Representative Joy.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Representative Bonner.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for your strong commitment to this. I truly appreciate that, and I'm hoping that we can get this amendment put on today. And I want to say thank you in advance to some of my colleagues. I do think the bill is vastly improved. I know the last time around I had expressed extreme concerns about constitutionality. We fixed that in this DE amendment, which was really critical because we don't want to pass something that we can't actually implement in day one. That doesn't make much sense. So I'm really grateful for that. I also really appreciate the prevention measures because I think, quite frankly, I'm less worried about the punitive side on the end. I'm I think it's much more important to prevent it in the first place, right? We can save ourselves a lot of dollars if they do not go to the wrong place in the first place. So I'm really grateful for that. I will say I'm leaning towards voting for this bill today, but I just wanted to say I do have some additional concerns, and I think you outlined some of those, particularly the one about MDE and making sure that we have folks with expertise in that area investigating issues in that area. And of course, with the federal rules, that makes sense. And I think that we want to make sure that continues. There's also, I think, some duplication still in our effort here. And, around here, we've got a lot of pennies to pinch. So I think we do not want to be duplicating efforts and spending potentially millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars where they should not be spent when they could be used elsewhere. And finally, we do still need to make sure that we collectively, as a group, come together on how we're going to fund this bill. And, right now, we are very likely going to be having zero targets, and we do not have any money. So I think while I value this and I really want to see it pass, I do think that those three things still need addressing, and I know there's going to be time to do that, but I just wanted to make sure that we get those on the record. Thank you for your diligence and your hard work.
All right, didn't hear a question there. Representative Quam. And members, we are going to start moving quickly. We got to get up through the rest
Thank
of
you,
the
Mr. Chair. I'll move quickly. Already, we have the OLA, which does the reviewing of processes and recommending improvements. Up until a few years ago, all of the federal grant review audits and verification that we're following the federal guidelines and procedures, those were performed by the auditor. A few years ago, it was changed to allow other entities to also do that because of the workload on the auditor. So I don't see why we need most of this in the DE, because we already have the expertise. We already have processes in place to do it. The problem is when the auditor comes across stuff that's a violation, they have no enforcement. So they refer it to other entities. And Unfortunately, a few years ago, the only other entity that was interested in investigations were the federal government, and we've seen, almost 90 convictions from that referral. So I think this Office of Independent Inspector General should be on the enforcement and et cetera, because we already have all these other functions within the OLA. Thank you.
Representative Norris, you want to respond to that briefly, or should we continue?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Nash. Just real briefly to Representative Quam's point, I am aware of a lot of the frustrations that the legislature has about the recommendations of the OLA not always being implemented to our satisfaction. And I think having an entity in the executive branch that is working diligently and is working directly with those state agencies to make sure that those best practices are implemented and adhered to makes a lot of sense and will avoid, hopefully, some of the frustrations we've seen with the OLA.
Thank you, Representative Norris. Representative Joy, you had another question?
Just request a roll call, sir.
Roll call has been requested. Roll call will be granted. Representative Cleaborn, you're next. I did not see anybody else seeking recognition, so Representative Cleaborn.
That's fine. For my side, I will just say, since a roll call has been requested, I have agreed to move this bill through to judiciary to do some of the important work that needs to be done. I'm going to say to the rest of my side, they can feel free to vote their conscience. However, my vote should be enough to get it across the finish line. I agree with you, Representative Quam, that the bill has duplicative work. The OLA and the BCA do good work, and this bill, even with the DE, will duplicate that work. And there are not clear lines. I'm also very concerned that the provision that puts this office above any state law is still present in this DE. I said I would not pass a bill out of this committee that was unconstitutional, so I want to thank you for fixing that. We have no idea how much this bill is going to cost. It is allowing a new law enforcement agency to be established, which has not been truly vetted anywhere. So I'm hoping that in addition to judiciary, this bill will also have to make a stop to public safety before it gets across the finish line, if that were to occur. I do want to recognize your hard work, Representative Norris. You have been a constant companion on this journey, and I understand your commitment as a lawyer. You know the importance of the law and following the law, and that no one is above the law. So that needs to really be fixed. I will agree to allow this bill to go out of committee today to judiciary where these issues still need to be fixed. I will not commit to a floor vote until these really important issues are fixed. And so I will let it go at that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will.
I'm sorry, Representative Kraft.
You've already spoken, and we're going to move on to a vote. So it is tradition that when the
Can I remind
lead
you?
or the chair goes.
Can I remind you, you let members speak after me last time. Representative Kraft was late because he had a professional appointment this morning. Please allow him to speak.
Representative Kraft, very briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Norris. Part of the reason also is the roll call was called very late in the game here. So,
Representative Kraft, any member can ask for a roll call at any time. It doesn't matter whether it's asked at the beginning, middle, or end. It was asked for, and it was granted. So please continue.
thank you, Mr. Chair, and I wasn't commenting on the efficacy of when
Please
it
proceed.
was. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Norris. Thank you for your steadfast work on this, for how much work you've done. I think you're making the bill substantially better, that it at least is constitutional, that we're focusing on prevention. I still have concerns over, that it's right now listed as above the law, and the cost. Look, I think fraud is absolutely, we cannot accept any, and I'm fully on board with that. I've had an issue with this bill from the very beginning because I believe that the money that we're allocating to this can be better spent elsewhere, better spent on system improvements. And I've been from the very beginning. That said, I really appreciate your work. I'm happy that this appears will progress out and continue to work on it. But my concern with this is there's been a rush towards this solution, and I think that there are better ways. We're putting in place a very large new bureaucracy. We don't know how much it's going to cost. And my sense is we would have better results by spending the money in different ways. So I'm a no.
Thank you, Representative Kraft. For my own conclusion, Representative Norris, thank you for working with Representative Anderson, who has been your partner in this, along with Senators Gustafson and Cruen and a large number of other legislators all working on this. And I will say that I was presenting to a group of city council members last night, and they have been watching this. They have been waiting for this. I will say thank you to my team, who has held firm on a lot of the things that had to stay in this bill and have made it so that this bill is going to leave this committee in a better condition than it showed up in. So with that, the chair will renew his motion that Senate File 856 as amended will move to the judiciary. Roll call has been requested, and this CLA will take the roll.
Chair Nashville, okay,
Representative Norris, my apologies, briefly.
no, sorry. Did we actually adopt the DE?
Oh, okay, my apologies. It's early and I'm under-caffeinated. So the DE6 has been brought before us. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The DE is amended. Your bill has been amended. We will now take the vote on the bill as amended. CLA will take the roll.
Chair Nash.
Aye.
Representative Cleavorn.
Cleavorn, aye.
Representative Davis.
Aye.
Representative Bonner. Bonner, aye.
Bonner, aye.
Representative Anderson.
Anderson, aye.
Representative Clardy.
Aye.
Representative Freiberg. Representative Jones.
Aye.
Representative Joy.
Aye.
Representative Kosnick. Representative Kraft.
No.
Representative Lugar Nicolai.
Aye.
Representative Quam.
Aye.
Representative Sexton.
Aye.
There being 13 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is passed out of committee and moves to judiciary.